Good morning. It's still morning, and my presentation is the title is "It's Not Easy Being Green," and it's kind of appropriate that we're here in Ireland, which is green, and Taiwan is evergreen. Kermit the Frog is definitely green. And pine chemicals, at least a long time ago, well, they still are considered to be green, but if you start going through history and how the definition of the word progressed, then all of the plastics that are recyclable, which is basically all of them, polyethylenes, polypropylenes, even the PVC, have all been called green because they were recyclable. And now we even have green benzene. So I'm not picking benzene for any other reason other than it is also now considered to be green because it is made, if it's made from bio-naphtha, which is green because it's has a bio in it, then it's now considered to be green as well. So we're going to try to answer what the green meant through all of the years and all of the iterations that it went through, and how the terms have changed, and how the pine chemical industry has been viewed and what's been happening to the rosin all throughout that change. And I'm going to be looking at it through the lens of adhesive industry, which is where I spent most of my life, and so that's going to, so that you understand that that's where a lot of my comments are coming from, and also that I am putting forward here the opinions of what's been happening, how it's been happening, and those may not necessarily coincide with PCA, so I preempt Amanda from saying that at the end. You will also notice that I may twitch once in a while during the presentation, and that's because Amanda put a shock collar on me, and in case I start touching the third rail, she's going to buzz me. So the definition of the word green, well, it depends. It depends on what the current geopolitical situation is, and who has the money basically controls what that definition is, what they want it to mean at any one time. And you will see how that has changed over the years. So going back to the original definition of green, I use my own definition in this case, and that basically meant that you have something that does not pollute the environment and does not cause any adverse health effects. The picture here you see is from June 22nd, 1969. This is Cuyahoga River in Cleveland on fire. And this was caused by, I mean, the river's been polluted for a long time by the industries around it, and this was, if I remember correctly, it's like 17th time the river caught on fire, but this was the last one. This was the date that basically was the genesis for creation of EPA in the States, that basically started to clamp down on pollution being generated by the industry and polluting the environment. Dioxin is another, is a chemical, even though it is natural, but in depending on concentration that you use it in and how it comes about, can be very deleterious to your health and cause a lot of health effects. And that has also been the impetus for a lot of changes in the laws and regulations to make sure that a lot of these chemicals do not get into the environment. So where do pine chemicals fit into that? Originally, everything was, we had a balance between hydrocarbons and pine chemicals. And again, this is all taken through the lens of the adhesive industry, so primarily the rosin esters, and derived from either the CTO or gum rosin is used as stachyfiers. And the rosin has always had carried the green mantle. It was, of course, derived from sustainable resources. It did not cause any adverse health effects. It was renewable and everything else. It was also, at that time, people cared about biodegradability, and it was definitely more biodegradable than hydrocarbons. So everything was going well, but at that time, the customers were also not willing to pay for being green. They just wanted the cheapest product that worked for them. Then the definition started to change. That was green, then came bio-based, and here's definition from the USDA. I'm not going to read it, but it basically says that basically anything derived from a biomass, whether it goes into polymers, resins, whatever, downstream, upstream, it's all considered bio-based. And the customers, the consumer companies at that time did start paying attention. They were still not willing to pay for it. The issue was that most of the products, again, from the adhesive standpoint, but from a lot, especially from the rosin side of things, constituted such a small percentage of the finished article that they would rather, for example, in the hygiene industry, they would rather spend the time on pulp that goes into diaper, because a lot of pulp went into diaper, versus the adhesive, we only use a couple of grams per diaper, to worry about whether it was based on rosin ester, on adhesive using rosin ester, or hydrocarbons. So, and also at about the same time, we had some developing headwinds, and you will see that nomenclature heading through the slides here, that because of perceived odor concerns, and this goes back to now to 1990s, the adhesive industry started to move away from rosin esters to hydrocarbon resins. Then came recyclables. Recycle, renew, reduce. And this basically, you will notice that I did not invent these definitions. These really are written. They are really quotes, because I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a government official, so there's no way I could have written that. But basically, it just means that you can take any material, and if you recycle it through a process, it becomes green. So, the issue here has become that when now you have plastics being recyclable, the consumer companies now shifted from having bio-based products to improve their green credentials, into recyclability. And what that also meant is that by using, for example, in a paperboard, more recyclable content, it also meant that, well, guess what? You're going to need less fractionation capacity, because you're actually making less paper and cardboard. The headwinds that we encountered with the pine chemicals during about the same time was that once you start recycling and stuff, you put in processes where so basically, for example, when you have plastic and it has a label on it, and when you put it through the recycling process, what they do is they solubilize everything, and then kind of dissolve everything, and then they skim the top, which is basically all of the lower molecular weight portions and low density portions, and they take it away, and then what's on the bottom is actually more of that recyclable material that you can reuse. The problem with rosin-based products was that they're inherently higher density, higher than the dissolvent medium, so they would not stay on the top. So that also made the adhesive industry rethink of how they use rosin esters, because they had to use something that would have a lower density to be able to make the customer's products recyclable. So it's also at the same time we ran into an issue in Europe with sensitivity labels. For all the wrong reasons, they've assigned, and I know Arizona at that time fought tooth and nail, and unfortunately to no end, that the skin sensitivity label had to be put on products containing rosin esters, and that did not go well with the adhesive industry either. Then we went into renewable and circular definition of green. This is the first time we started using the words like biomass and biodiesel in much more context as being green, and the especially circular was very interesting, but this is where you basically make everything, reuse everything, and have very little new. The idea was to have very little of the virgin raw material input into the system, and you basically extend. The idea was to extend the life cycle of any product that you use, but you knew this was not going to catch on, because Apple would never allow their phones to last more than 1 year. They would have to come out with one every year, a new one every year. So you knew this was doomed from the start. Also at this time, the industry started using carbon credits, and there were more emphasis being put on that. And what they would do is they would start buying up the bio-based materials, like rosins and stuff, convert them into carbon credits so that they can actually use more hydrocarbons to grow their business. So most of the growth came from the hydrocarbon side still. And this is why we saw a bit of a resurgence in use of rosin esters and some other products, pine chemical industry associated products. This is also where we saw a starting use of the biodiesel, and that's where TOFA started to make a play. From the technology standpoint, there was an advent of low density polyolefins that basically necessitated the use of hydrocarbon resins. So if you think of the whole renewable and recyclable concept, what you try to do is to use as little material as possible and to stretch it out for a longer, its use for a longer period of time. So again, the lower density products that would do the same job, you would use less of them, and that has also, also allows for lightweighting and the rest of the benefits, and that has also not been, has not favored the pine chemicals. And at the same time, we also had a huge investment primarily in China for hydrogenated hydrocarbon resins, which are the premium resins that can be used just about everywhere. And that investment continues to this day. We're so oversupplied, continue to be oversupplied, and that was cratered the prices and put the rosin-based products on a non-competitive level. It's just insane. And then came the sustainability and what I call the carbon accounting definition of green. So now basically anything that is sustainable, which is basically anything that can be reused, comes from natural sources, is considered green. So if you take a look at this definition, so glass is now sustainable because you can recycle it, reuse it, and everything else. Carbon accounting, in order not to touch this third rail, I had to use my own definition. And basically, it's an accounting scheme where you account for carbon, and it's equivalent in your processes to come up with the definition of green. And this is how benzene became green. So basically, all of the consumer companies now, they don't really care if it's bio-based or not, whether it pollutes the environment or does not, whether it's made from coal or whatever. As long as the accounting scheme shows that it's carbon neutral or carbon zero or whatever, it's green. None of the other effects apparently matter if you take a look at the statements. Last year I talked about bio-naphtha as opposed to biofuels. They're two completely different things. And the bio-naphtha, again, is what makes benzene green, and any other polyolefin for that matter. The CTO industry now has to compete with that use to get the, I think Michelle mentioned that, the black liquor soap makes a perfect biomass, and for both the biofuels and the bio-naphtha. And now we have to compete for that resource with the big petrochemical industries. So, I'm going to be way ahead of time, but I think I might have really like that, and so would you. So what does the future of green, in my view, holds? The problem is that in today's world, all of the cycles have been compressed. What took hundreds of years and decades now is basically we're measuring cycles in terms of years, sometimes even months. But regardless, it's all circular. It's all circular. And the pendulum no longer swings quickly, but it swings very fast, and it swings to utter and complete extremes. And right now it is swung to, avoid the third rail, swung over to one side very much so that it will take a while, well, not a while, depend, but it will eventually come back. And the corrections are going to be very large and very swift. For example, RINs, they're due for a collapse in a couple of years. And what does that mean? That means that all of the biodiesel subsidies are going to go away because there's going to be more biodiesel produced than there are RINs. Then there's demand for RINs. So all of the subsidies for biodiesel are going to go out, which means that biodiesel is going to shoot up in price. And that's going to affect the whole transportation industry and all of the books, all of the accounting books of just about every producer that produces both diesel and biodiesel, as well as the carbon accountants. Bio-naphtha is trading to about 2 to 3 times higher than regular naphtha, and it is now on the Argus platform. You can actually trade it now on the Argus platform, and you can trade it on Platts, I believe, as well now. And again, so as the pendulum is over on one side, you will have a tremendous demand for bio-naphtha from the petrochemical companies who will buy it so that they can make green benzene and green polyolefins, which is what their customers demand. So there's still going to be a huge demand from for the bio-naphtha molecules, or from black liquor soap and on, from that standpoint. What's making all of this possible is the subsidies that government puts on making industries do stuff that may not necessarily make sense, from my standpoint, my opinion. In this inflationary period, if you take a look at the global economy, the sustainability of all of these subsidies is in question. It cannot continue indefinitely. As I can't remember exactly who now said that, eventually you run out of other people's money, and there's only so much you can print. So so eventually it will have to come to a halt. People will have to start doing what's good. And we are, as we keep going forward, our standard of living actually is decreasing, probably for the first time in history. We're talking about putting sails on the ships. That doesn't sound like 22nd century to me, technology, even though it actually makes a lot of sailing. I had a chance to do it a couple of times, and I absolutely love it. But in the big scheme of things, what's next? Oars, so we don't use the energy to propel ships. As the standard of living declines around the world, people are going to start questioning why is that happening, and start actually asking scientific questions about what's going on and whether the numbers being offered to them are actually true. There's the third rail. Bzz. Okay, so where do pine chemicals fit into all of this stuff? So it's still, regardless of all of the different definitions and everything around over the years, it's still the only true green product out there. It comes from the trees, cannot be more green than that, especially pine trees. It does the job adequately at this point in time. If you take a look at black liquor soap versus rosin ester, for example, and the use of black liquor soap or CTO and tofu and naphtha and bio-naphtha and biofuels, all you did was you basically took whatever is being produced and you shifted it from one bucket into another. But it's still pine chemicals, in the sense it was derived from the pine trees and everything else. So we have to keep that in mind. And like I said, everything is circular. We'll go through this cycle, and eventually the cycle will turn around, and it will come. The demand will come back, as Michel has said. And his concern was that are we going to have enough raw materials, enough pine chemicals to actually fill the demand. And that is why this is my challenge actually to the industry, is now is actually the time to, what you do is to say you just shift molecules from one bucket to another and try to make as much money as you can on the bucket where the demand is right now, but spend those dollars that you make from it in your R&D and start working on solutions, especially if you followed my presentation on the headwinds and technological problems. And one of them, the biggest one that I've seen, is density problem is creating solutions and working with companies to provide, because you cannot change the density of rosin ester. It is what it is. But you can work with people to actually create a solution that has lower density, the entire solution. So it's, I don't know, Creighton's done a great job lately. So a couple of patents on improving their organoleptics and their upstream processes, and much kudos to them over the last for all that work over the couple of years. But more needs to be done to make sure that you guys are ready, not just from, okay, well, here is the product I've been making for the last, 40, 50, 100 years. It hasn't changed much. Rosin ester is still rosin ester. Rosin is still rosin. But you have to start investing money in getting the products out there that actually tie in to the current demand from the technology perspective. So pine chemicals are not going away. I think there's a bright future for them. Just have to wait for the right time. But again, my challenge to the industry is to make sure that you are ready and that you actually just concentrate on making money where you can, but spending the money on improving your products and getting them out into the industry, what the industry needs right now, and all. That's it, way ahead of time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vitaly. Any questions for Vitaly before we head out to lunch and before you head into your slew of meetings that are scheduled for the afternoon? Sure. The microphone's right here, right behind you. You do have to stand. Sorry. Go ahead.
Vitaly, do you consider bio-naphtha a byproduct, like HBO? What's the driver for how much bio-naphtha makes it to the market? Is it from the demand for the refiners, or is it just comes out of the vegetable oil?
Okay, so this goes back to my last year's presentation, so forgive me if I don't remember the exact numbers. But no, demand comes from petrochemical industries, the petrochemical crackers that want to use bio-naphtha to be able to count those green carbons in the production of their downstream products. The HVO and stuff, everything derived from vegetable oils, especially in Europe, is capped to, I can't remember now. I would just say like 2 to 10%. I think it's less than that because it's considered to be taken away from the farm use. So that's capped. But that's part of bio-naphtha. Now, the CTO does not, stuff based on CTO does not have that limit. So basically, demand comes from the petrochemical industries, and they have the ability to chew up for cracking.
Yes.
Correct. And they will.
If the petrochemical industry wanted more bio-naphtha, would the vegetable oil industry make it available to them?
No, but vegetable industry, they're already using as much as they can. There's a cap on how much you can use of vegetable stuff.
Okay.
Good. Any other questions or follow-up questions from anyone? Oh, we have back here. Alan, yes, the microphone's right here. Thank you. Oh, just stand in front of it if you don't mind. It's hard to get out, so there you go.
Hello. So, hello, Vitaly. Thank you very much for the excellent presentation. One question about your perspective on the future of sustainable production of CST. I'm raising the question because you mentioned sustainability, and I believed very much in all the pine chemicals and coming out of gum turpentine and out of CST. But we know that CST has an environmental impact. And what is your perspectives on improvements of reduction of environmental impact on CST production. I think that may be a key thing for the future too.
Yeah. So at the beginning, I mentioned that most of my focus and experience is used through a lens of adhesive industry, and that's primarily CTO and rosin. I am not as versed in CST part of the equation. I know it's there, but honestly, I do not know enough to answer your question. So I would rather not make stuff up. So I'm sorry, I just cannot answer your question.
Thank you. Maybe just a side thing. Transforming very complex substances like lignin to simple substances takes a lot of energy, and today the chemistry is not at its best to do that. Later on it will happen, but there is a lot of environmental concerns about some of the aspect of from biomass to monomers. And CST is a different thing, but and of course the petrochemical products, they have certainly a very questionable impact. So each product will have its plus and minus in terms of sustainability. But that's why it's interesting to see the full profile of each of the streams, because it may also be important for the consumer later on. Thank you.
So I'm sorry. So what was the actual question? I mean, you mentioned that the way I understood it is that it's a complex situation of how you value stuff, but in my view, it got to a point where the accountants are now ruling, are deciding what is green and what is not, just based on pure calculations. So it doesn't really matter whether the stuff comes from the dirtiest coal. If you've offset it by enough credits, it becomes green. So, and that's the unfortunate part, and this is where I'm saying that I mentioned before that there is a disconnect as to definition of what green really means.
Thank you.